Today, I'm going to show you how I make my delicious sippable bone broth. This stuff is to die for. It all starts very similarly to how I made my demi-glace video, and you need good beef bones. These are some knuckle bones, which are great in collagen, and you got some leg bones here, which are also super high in it because they're filled with that marrow. We also got some water boiling on the side, and what we're going to do is very similar to how I made the demi-glace, but also different. You can see here that these are just beautiful, but they have some blood on them, as most bones do. So we are going to take these, and we're going to do a 3 to 5 minute pre-boil, which is going to get a lot of that kind of gross blood and scum and all that crap out. I didn't really care about this when making regular broth because you're doing so many other things to that and adding aromatics, but you can see this is just after 2 or 3 minutes. All that white gunk and foam that rises to the surface is what you don't want. So after 3 or 5 minutes, we're just going to pull those bones out and we're going to get rid of that water. That is an essential step to me when I'm making something that, for me, bone broth, this is just to drink. We're not making soup, stock, anything with this. This is very simply just to drink. Once I get those out, though, I'm going to add in 1 onion. You could use whatever you want. This is a Vidalia. And I'm also going to take a clove of garlic that I have sitting around, cut in half, throw that on as well. And then we're going to bake this for about 45 minutes at right around 425 degrees just to get them nice and brown. Once you pull them out, that's what you're looking for. They're absolutely beautiful. You can see some of that fat rendering. And don't mix that fat in. We're going to separate that. Now that the water's been emptied, we're going to put all these bones back in. But yeah, we're not going to use that fat. Normally, you want to get all that goodness off the bottom of that tray. But that is fat that we're going to wind up having to skim off. So as it renders out, leave it off. If there's any nice little brown bits, you can kind of scrape those up and use those. But try to keep the fat to the side. And now, after we put everything in, I'm going to fill it up with water to about 1 inch higher than the bones and the veggies are sitting. And then we're going to bring that up to a boil. The only difference is I'm going to add one other ingredient here, which is a nice stalk of lemongrass. I find this really helps a sippable bone broth by giving it beautiful fragrance. Then on top of that, we're also going to add in the full juice of 1 lemon. Some people claim that this is great for helping suck vitamins out of the bones. I'm not totally sure, but I just do it anyway. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't really add any flavors. It's good to go. After you bring it up to a boil, let it sit for 15 minutes, and this is what we're going to do first. We're just going to skim off some of that fat and any of those other bubbles that rise to the surface. You really want to make sure you're skimming this often and getting off as much as you can. Do this for the first 3 to 4 hours. You can see the water level dropping here. This is after about 1 or 2 hours. Now I'm going to jump ahead to 3 or 4 hours in. You can see the water levels come down great, and you're getting a lot more of that fat floating to the surface. That's what you want to get out now. Obviously, you could pull it out later when it solidifies. That's totally fine, but try to get as much of that out now as you possibly can. You can see just from giving it a nice little mix, there's a lot of fat in there. A lot of those little bits are now breaking off of those bones, and they're rising to the surface. I also threw in another stalk of lemongrass because that first one after this 5 or 6 hour mark really was zapped to flavors, but I was looking for a little more. But look at all that oil level. That needs to come off. Here we are right around 8 hours in. It was going down a little further in the reduction than I wanted, so I'm going to add in 1 more cup of water, so the next 2 or 3 hours is going to really keep going. I'm going to pull this at the 10-hour mark, which is right here. You can see a lot of that gunk is rising to the surface. Those are just fat pieces that aren't really going to break down, and now I'm going to start to strain it. I like to make my sippable bone broths go for right around 10 hours. Some people go longer, but I feel like there's really diminishing returns. But that's the main thing between this for me and just a regular stock is the length. I'm never going to simmer a stock for this long. I don't think it's worth it in stocks. For this, something that you're just sipping and you're getting the essence of it, that's what you want to do. So after I get all those big chunks out, I put it back into the stock pot, and now I'm going to filter it again through the same system, but just with a piece of cheesecloth added in, just to get all the really fine impurities. There are a lot of them. You can keep it without this step, but trust me, you're going to notice it. It's going to feel gritty. It's going to feel grimy on your teeth. That's what we're pulling out. That's the stuff that you don't want. And that goes a very long way when you filter it out for taste. And after filtering, here's what you're left with. You can see a very little bit of fat left over, but that's totally fine. We're going to cover this, cool it, and then fridge it overnight. Here's what we're left with. You can see there's just a very thin layer of fat left. That's totally fine, easy to come off. If you didn't skim it nearly as much, this will be much thicker and a little harder to remove, but that's totally fine. I'm also going to put that on the side because you could render this down, kind of clean it out a little bit and get rid of that leftover stock, and it makes a great cooking fat. So you could do that if you want, but here's what we're left with. You could see this is way more gelatinous than most of the stocks I like to make because I like to keep those a little less, meat jello, but for something that you want collagen-rich sipping broth, this is perfect. Throw it back in that pan. I'm going to start to just heat it back up because now we're going to just get a little bit of a last filtering, and then we're going to throw it into portions. Once it comes up to a nice boil, we're going to repeat that process that we did last night, but just with the smaller strainer, not the double strainer, but still a cheesecloth. We're going to pour that broth through it into any container you want. I like these plastic like to-go quart containers. They're very easy to store in your fridge or freezer, and just do that. You're not going to get a ton out from this last filtering, but it does make a big difference. This is the little stuff that people notice when they taste it, and it is just pure, it's high quality, and it doesn't have any little grimy bits. But that's it. Look at that. That color is beautiful. The taste is beautiful. There's no salt in this, so if you're going to drink it and you like that saltiness, add a little bit, but otherwise this is basically salt-free, aside from what comes in the bones. And look at that. Drink it, save it, put it in your freezer, it'll last forever. This is how I make bone broth, just for drinking. This isn't for sauces. You can use it, but it's delicious.